The veteran LGBT activist and human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, political journalist Ava-Santina, and by the best-selling author and conservative commentator Douglas Murray. Well, Douglas, you're safely over there in the United States, so let me start with you before the fun starts here. This stuff reads like a joke, but it's really not funny when you get into the weeds of it. This is limitless self-identity gone bonkers.
Yeah, it's the very stupid results of a very stupid ideology being rolled out by very stupid people. Basically, everything has come unstuck in recent years by the ever-expanding alphabet acronym people, where the fight for gay rights and minority sexual rights turned into this demand, this claim that there was no such thing as biological sex. As Peter Tatchell and others well know, the argument for gay rights was won by saying, we're just like the rest of you. It was also won by saying, you know, we just want to live and let live. Yet the gender ideologues have done something totally different. They've said, you don't have the right to have your own say in this. We are right, and you have to agree with us. They say, we're here, and instead of saying we're here, we're queer, and just get used to it, it's we're here, and as a result, biological reality doesn't exist. Well, clearly, this very, very idiotic ideology is causing havoc. Just today, Piers, there's another tape from a school in Scotland where some poor boy is having to explain to his teacher that there's only two biological sexes and that the gender woo-woo stuff is nonsense. And yet again, it's the student having to educate the teacher because the teacher has been indoctrinated into stupidity due to the gender ideologues.
OK, Ava, you're laughing. Why?
Well, it's just quite amusing, really. I mean, we're talking about children that are 12 and 13. I mean, when I was at school, I had a girl who identified as a horse, but not in this sort of like problematic way that we're now labelling it. She didn't actually think she was a horse. She was just quite strange and walked around and, you know...
But nobody at the school then, no teachers would have tolerated that, and now having to be tolerated.
No teacher would have tolerated bullying of that child, and that's what this teacher in Sussex has done. They've said it's not acceptable for boys in that class to take the mickey out of someone who's obviously clearly just a child, and they're exploring their imagination.
Who says they're a cat?
Yes, but... Piers, they're 12.
And is actually interfering with the lessons by talking in cat language, including meowing. And if people don't go along with being a cat, that is actually assuming the identity of an animal that this person is not, and then insisting everybody else conform to it. That is madness.
That's not what's happening. What's happening is there's a child who's slightly more imaginative than their peers, and they are acting out this sort of fallacy, and that's fine. But to make But to make it about trans, or this is where it gets dangerous, OK? The Telegraph...
Oh, it's very damaging to trans people. I agree.
Right, OK.
I agree with that.
The reason it's most damaging, the Telegraph have been reporting this, it's up 400% in the last couple of years, them reporting trans issues. I don't understand why they've got this weird obsession with going into
Let me explain why. Let me explain why.
No, it's quite gross.
Let me explain why. When you have in women's sport 6'4" biological males destroying biological females at elite sport level in swimming pools, on racetracks, in other sports, that's when it becomes a full frontal assault on women's rights to fairness and equality. When you include them going into dressing rooms and so on and mixing with biological females, then there's a safety issue. When you have, as we had in Scotland, a male rapist identifying at his trial as a woman to get put into a woman's prison and being sent there by the female boss of Scotland at the time, who's now obviously in her own troubles, that is why this is happening. Kids are watching all this stuff, and as kids do, they want a piece of the action.
No, Piers, don't be ridiculous. There is nothing, there's no similarity between a child wanting to be a cat when they're 12 years old and someone competing in the Olympics.
Oh, there is.
There is
Peter, you and I have had...
I'm Aunt Lydia. Are you all well? Come on, I want you to say we're very well, Aunt Lydia. So, are you well?
Very well, Aunt Lydia.
That's great. Because you are well. You're healthy, you're free from infections, and you're the only ones whose tests are positive. You're the lucky ones.
We're the lucky ones.
Amen.
you and I have had a lot of civilized conversations about all this, right? And I want to continue that. I don't think that the trans community gets helped at all by any of this, right? But I don't think it's the media obsessing. I think what you're seeing is, as the trans community get ever more active and populous, if you like, for want of a better phrase, and their activists get more aggressive, when they go to battle on things like women's sport, they're losing everyone and they're piling mockery onto the trans community.
If we can go back to the Telegraph article.
Yeah.
It's quite mischievous. Out of the, I don't know, million or more pupils in our schools, they come up with 5 examples. 5 examples out of a million. Now, that's wrong. I agree it's wrong. But, as Ava says, the kids are just acting out fantasies. When I was a little kid, I wanted to be Robin Hood.
But that's fine. That's fine. But the schools should not be tolerating it.
But the schools are not.
A teacher should not be saying, if you believe that women have vaginas and men have penises, you have to leave the school. That is complete nonsense.
No.
Right?
In this particular case, the Telegraph cited this handful of examples. They were by teachers, individual teachers. They were not school policy. And in at least one case, the school disowned the teacher and the policy and said that it wouldn't happen again.
But what about this case in Rye College?
Well, yeah, I'm sure there are some examples of excesses, but on the basis of those exceptions, you can't make a generalised attack upon the school system and suggest that all our kids are being propagandised in this way, because it's simply not
But when you hear
happening.
that teacher, I think, to bring Douglas back in, when you hear that teacher, there's clear evidence of what we've all been fearing has been going on, which is a teacher caught on tape literally spewing nonsensical gender ideology propaganda.
Only 1 out of 100 women can still bear children, and some women stopped. Believing there would be no future, they refused to bear children. They wouldn't even try. They were lazy women. They were sluts.
One teacher.
Yes,
only
I think,
one
by the way,
teacher. One teacher. Tens of thousands.
Well, hang on. One teacher caught on tape.
think-
Right, there have been many other instances of this being reported, but no one's actually had it on tape. It's a bit like, I would liken it to the Partygate scandal, when we finally got a video of the people having what was clearly a party. There have been lots of rumours about it.
So
now we have a teacher clearly on tape doing this
But
stuff.
it's not official school policy.
if I may,
Schools across the
if I
country
may.
are
Well,
not...
she's still, to
I'm
my
not
knowledge,
sanctioning this.
she is still working at that school. Douglas.
If I may, first of all, Ava rather unfortunately misspoke earlier when she said that the schoolgirl in question was acting out of fallacy. I think you meant a fantasy. But actually, she is acting out of
Thanks, Douglas.
fallacy.
Thanks ever
a
so much.
fallacy.
But do you know what I find
fallacy
She was right with
which has
fallacy.
been-
Do you know what's
a
fascinating
fallacy
about
which
Douglas?
has been propagated, a fallacy which has been propagated by gender ideologues and is doing profound damage to gay people, among others, in our society, as well as women.
Like
and
you
let me
ever
explain very
cared.
quick. Let me
Ever cared.
explain very quickly why. I can't quite hear you, but I can hear you muttering something. Let me quickly explain why. A poll that just got published in the United States showed that among the general population, support for gay marriage has been starting to decline in the last year. Why is that? It's because the arguments that actually brought about liberal rights for all minorities in the last few decades have started to get turned on their head and turned against people. What is the source of that? It is the gender ideology movement. What is the tripwire for the general public? It is children. It is people learning that their children are being taught nonsensical things. It is being seen by the wider public, most of whom are heterosexual and don't need to identify as cis or anything else. It is being seen from that vantage point as the LGBTQIA+ movement losing control of itself. And so a backlash is starting. And the backlash is coming because people are lying to children and are using children for medical experiments. There's nothing
that's
funny about that.
ridiculous.
There's nothing that should cause levity in that.
John Money was a pioneer in the astonishing new field of sex change surgery.
Dr. Money, it's still a pretty drastic procedure, isn't it?
Well, it's a drastic procedure by your standards and mine, but for the people who are living in desperation, perhaps the best way to understand it is that it seems no more drastic to them than circumcision.
Dr. Money was on there, and he was very charismatic. He was very He seemed very highly intelligent and very confident of what he was saying.
Janet thought that there might be a chance that he could help her son by changing him into a daughter. Traditionally, it had been thought that all children had an inborn sense of being a boy or girl, a natural instinct towards male and female behavior. That before birth, our gender identity is programmed by our genes and hormones, and that it's unchangeable. If this was true, then Bruce Reimer already had his male gender identity biologically fixed in the womb, and he could never be turned into a girl. But John Money didn't think things were that simple.
We've been stereotyped in our view of male and female behavior. I suppose primarily because it's been that way for literally centuries and probably hundreds of centuries.
The Hopkins team believed that the main key to how we develop our gender identity was not genetic or hormonal, it was how we were raised. A child might be born with some innate sense of its gender, but this could be overridden by upbringing. But nurture could override nature. A child taught to behave in a masculine way would grow up thinking and feeling like a boy. Raising a child like a girl, for instance giving it dolls to play with, would encourage it to develop a maternal instinct and a feminine way of behaving.
Should be treated by adults seriously.
Okay,
No,
Ava?
So, Douglas, it's really important, actually, all of that point that you've just brought up. It's very on brand for you because, you know, you like to stoke fear. You've actually made a career out of it. I'll take you back to your book, The Strange Death of Europe, and you made a big fright. You know, you frightened the entire public about your thoughts on Europe, and we ended up in Brexit. You weren't the sole contributor to that, but you were a big
Can we
voice
stick
in
on
that.
to the
I will.
I may
And then,
say so
now
very
we're talking
quickly.
about LGBTQ,
If I may say so
and you're
very
creating...
quickly,
Hang on,
Piers.
you spoke. I'm speaking.
No,
I'm speaking.
I'll
you spoke.
reply.
This is, I mean...
And I'll reply.
Hello. I haven't
Let
finished.
Ava speak, please.
Now,
Douglas.
back on the trans issue, when you're talking...
I hate to punish her, but she abused herself, and your body is a temple of purity, so let that be a lesson to you.
What you've just done there is basically say that the whole of America, who have historically had a problem with gay marriage, are now turning on it because a couple of children in a classroom in Sussex want to be a cat. If you can't see the ridiculousness in that argument, I can't help you.
The bigger issue is there is no such thing as gender ideology. We all have gender identities. You identify as a man, and I fully respect you.
Well, no, hang on. I don't identify as a man. I was born a biological male.
Yes.
That's where this whole thing
Piers, you need to let me
goes
come in.
rogue. I'll bring you back in, Douglas, as I want to say. That's where the whole debate goes rogue. You were born a biological male. You were born a biological female. Douglas, biological male. This is just a fact. Right?
No.
Once you start saying there are hundreds of genders and you can identify as anything you want, you're going to end up with kids at school going, I'm a horse. And you've got to treat me like a horse.
Piers, you're confusing two things.
No, I'm not.
Sex and gender.
I'm not.
I accept
they are being conflated.
Biological sex is one thing which I totally accept, and so do 99% of the people in the LGBT plus community. Gender is something different. Gender identity is how you see yourself. And
do you believe it's limitless?
No, I don't believe it's limitless.
What's the limit?
Well, there was basically male and female and intersex, but there are people who have different gender identities.
No, but how many genders are there?
Well, there is no fixed number.
So what's the limit?
I don't see a particular limit.
There's no limit. So when you said there's no, you said there is a limit. Now you admit there's no limit.
Sorry.
Well,
there is. Sorry.
Well,
there is male and female
is
identity.
there a limit or not to
There's
the number of genders?
intersex identity.
No, that's sex.
But
on gender, is there a limit to number of genders?
Well, there are some people who are asexual. That's an identity.
No, there are
some
the BBC.
people-
The BBC has put in education videos. There are 100+ genders.
Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
So what is the limit? What's the number?
Well, I'm not going to specify a particular number, but it's very small.
But where do you draw the line?
Well, I draw the line based on science and evidence. And we know that there is a thing called intersex, where people are born with a mixture of both.
That is
male,
literally what it says on.
both
That's what it
male
says on
and
the tin.
female.
That is intersex.
Yeah.
People are born with chromosomes from both, right? That is a medical condition.
Yeah.
That's inarguable, right? We're talking about gender.
Well, trans identity is also a biological fact.
I know, but once I've
rooted in brain structures and processes.
I understand it, but once
as the new science shows.
But once you get into 100 genders, people can
we're
literally...
not debating 100 genders.
Well, actually, the BBC has taught kids that. This is back to Douglas's point about affecting the brains of impressionable young kids.
Well, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with the BBC if they're saying 100+ genders.
Okay, Doug.
If a person has a penis, he's a man. If a person has a penis, he's a man. If he doesn't want to lose it, even though he doesn't use it, if a person has a penis, he's a man.
I don't know, Ava, anything about your career. I don't know if you have one. But you did try to imply that you knew something about mine, and you just showed you know nothing about it, because actually my 2017 bestseller, The Strange Death of Europe, was not about the EU. So you should learn at some point to read more than the title of the book before
Europe.
commenting upon it.
It was about, and it was about
so
migration.
Let me very quickly...
And how rude are you? How rude are you?
Very
You've built a career out of fear-mongering, and you're now importing those evangelical American ideas onto UK television.
You haven't even built a career, have you? You haven't even built a career.
What are you talking about? I'm on the same panel as you, Han, and we're getting the same...
Do you know what? I'm going to wrap it up by saying you've both got wonderful careers, or you wouldn't be on Piers Morgan Uncensored. Before I let...